Welcome Our Revolution NOLA membership. My name is David Alvarez. Like you, I have been going to forums, reading, trying to understand the candidates. Today we are bringing you video responses to questions of each candidate, Desiree Charbonnet and LaToya Cantrell, with the hopes that it will help you in determining who you feel is going to be the best for the future of our city. Please review these videos, share these videos, and we hope that they help you in your decision on November 18th when you go and vote. Thank you so much. All right, so our first question, and welcome,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Cantrell.
Thank
Our first question is regarding patronage and city government. The mayor has considerable influence over how we are governed through the power of appointment to the multiple boards and commissions that govern much of our city's work. What process will you follow in selecting your appointees to the multiple commissions and boards in our city?
Okay. Well, the process that I would follow is one that thoroughly engages the New Orleans City Council in that process as well. So, working with other elected officials, the council as a body, and not just having them make recommendations, but really listening and taking a thorough look and real consideration of the individuals that they are putting forth, meaning the New Orleans City Council. I would even engage organizations like the Equity Resiliency organization, where now over 125 responsible citizens in our city have gone through an equity and a race relations kind of training to really get at the heart of some of the biases that we all have, but when we work and we acknowledge them, it really allows us to work through them, but through the lens of building community, respecting people's viewpoints and their experiences, and again, getting to the root causes of some of these biases that when you don't have the right people on these boards and commissions, and when they're offering their own level of subjectivity and biases, it takes us further away from having a city that is real equitable. And so I'm very focused on that and wanting to be very intentional about the individuals and the stakeholders that we do involve in a process to have the best individuals with the core competencies and skill sets and the right attitude to serve in a capacity of leadership on these boards and commissions. Being a council person, I've had to interact with and work with many of them, and so it's been my on-hands experience to where some of them can be so subjective that they are not even aligned with their mission nor guidelines or criteria in which they're supposed to be rendering in terms of the decisions that they're supposed to be making. So I just see a better effort to engage my colleagues on the council. They're boots on the ground in regards to the people because they're councilmatic districts. I respect that. I am a councilwoman now, so I know that. And I just want to build that into the process moving forward.
Okay. Well, building upon that, would you be willing to pledge to convene a set of third-party advisory boards that are comprised of relevant professionals and concerned citizens that would review and make appointment recommendations to you?
I would not be against that at all, given the advisory board is very much diverse, not just along racial lines, but social economics as well, gender, as it relates to our LGBT community. I mean, across the board, youth in that as well, seniors. If it's truly diverse with no hidden agendas, only there to move this city forward in that light, and I'm for it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for your answer. So our next topic would be the economy in general.
Okay.
Understanding that law provides the city with 35% with a 35% DBE participation target for our contractors, how do you ensure that more city dollars go to smaller operators and locals, and specifically ensure that the city meets and enforces its targets for DBE participation in our city contract?
Well, one, I've been a part of the process and, of course, the decision to pass legislation that holds us to that standard of 35% DBE participation. So my record on it is solid, having been a part of it. I would like to advance that really of not being just a good faith effort, but one that transitions into becoming mandatory. But in addition to that, I would like to take an even deeper dive of connecting, of course, our disadvantaged businesses with that opportunity, but with a clear lens and vision of scaling them up to become primes on many of these contracts. To look at it like other cities do, to where you don't need an overall, even in some cases, an overall prime, but you break down the job so that you can allow for an advantage, a fair advantage, to give our minority businesses a real opportunity of participating. And so measuring the effectiveness of this, but it would be a priority for me. So trying to really enhance and move and shift the DBEs to have a better role to play as a prime, but also looking at very closely some of these DBEs in the partnership end up having to pay more to participate, and they get less of a shake, a fair advantage. So we're going to have to really look deeper into this. And I've just seen ways to where DBEs are taking on larger responsibility, but yet it's kind of disguised under this old 35%. Yeah. So we need to make sure that we're being fair, and we're being firm to it. And some of these contractors are bidding on the work using DBEs, but only to terminate them after they get the job. So again, it's accountability and transparency that I will put forth in an administration.
Well, in line with your response, would you be willing to pledge to set a goal of doubling the number of contractors that are in compliance and reach 35% DBE, whether they're subcontracting or whatnot?
Well, I think having set goals are a good thing. Definitely, we may, if we meet them, great. If we exceed them, fabulous. Yes. But as long as we're moving the ball, but in a healthy manner. Not just 1% we moved it and we're satisfied, but really being intentional about how we're growing and connecting people to the opportunity. So setting a goal, but having real measurements in there so that it is built-in accountability would be my approach to it.
Wonderful. Our next topic would be budgetary topic. From a critical thinking perspective, the city's budget represents the priorities and values of our city. We currently spend only 3% of our municipal budget on families, while spending over 60% on enforcement and security. How will you lead the city departments to craft a budget that prioritizes families?
Well, one, I will create an office, a department of youth and family services. That's number one. And build in the mechanisms to increase that level from 3% to definitely much greater than that. And that will be working with my colleagues on the New Orleans City Council to push for those increases. But at the same time, under that department, it will provide us a better opportunity to leverage public assets, both in terms of funding, but also in terms of other resources like our libraries, like our recreation department, like our public health. All of these things matter, but I do see silos that need to be broken down. I see a better way of allocating private money that's funneled through the city to better support families, of course, supportive services that are tied to mental health, that are tied to just behavioral health across the board. In addition to improving just programming and connecting our families to the programs, because we have many throughout the city that are not necessarily created by the city nor funded by the city, but not everyone knows about them. So kind of creating that front door is what I would like to do with creating that department, because when you come to City Hall, you should be able to be connected to what's out there, whether it's something that the city is responsible for or other organizations that are providing the service. But the not knowing is killing our families, killing opportunity, and greater pushing them towards living in this at or below poverty. And many of our families, as you know, are single family. households, and over 40% of our kids are living at or below poverty in our city. So with some level of intentionality and of course additional resources, but the connectivity is so important, and to get the outcomes that our people need.
Well, in line with that response, do you pledge to increase the share of our budget to a specific percentage, let's say 10%?
You mean in terms of towards youth and towards families?
Families.
I would say I would love to see it, towards the 10%, but it could even be greater. It would be having a thorough assessment of both the dollars that we do get from HUD, for example, most of, in terms of youth and families, are coming from the allocation we get from HUD. And also understanding that since 13, that allocation has kind of been getting smaller and smaller, which requires us to be more creative with the tax dollars that we do have and generate. So having a thorough assessment of where the money is going, even trying to activate programming that may be aligned with the New Orleans Police Department, for example, but it's about building community and neighborhood policing practices that really go towards, again, strengthening families. So it's just being creative, but I do see an increase in funding, whether it's 10%, whether it's 15%, or even greater than that, but it's going to be assessing what we have so that we can grow,
Thank you.
And using how we use private money as well. Building these public-private partnerships are essential. And how do we use private dollars, like with the Wisner grant money, for example? That can be more towards youth and families. That could not so much increase the budget on the general fund side, but surely could increase the allocation of those Wisner dollars to activate the programming. So again, creativity, how we do it.
Next topic would be housing. The city is currently undergoing a massive escalation in housing prices and rents, thus pushing accessible housing out of the range of an ever-increasing percentage of our working residents. Data show that short-term rentals exacerbate this problem. How will you govern our current short-term rental market?
Well, one is working with the New Orleans City Council. As a part of the council now, I voted to put forth regulations related to the short-term rental. Currently, we have about 5,000 units that are registered and permitted, short-term rentals in the city. The housing NOLA plan calls for over 30,000 units. Okay, so short-term rental is an issue, but it's clearly not the issue that's stopping us from activating more affordable units on the ground. But what I would do is start initially hitting the ground, pushing the state as well as the city to researching and holding accountable these organizations and agencies that benefited from public dollars to activate affordable housing. And many of these, one, are not in compliance. No one's been watching. The state has not inspected at all. There's no enforcement. The city is lagging as well. But I know for a fact there are units that are currently on the market that receive subsidy and should be affordable right now, with an uptick of the year of 2026, 2027, 2029, that they're supposed to be affordable up until that period. And right now, units are on the market. So that's low-hanging fruit that we need to address immediately. And then, of course, fully implementing initiatives and incentivizing affordability. Providing soft seconds to get people into affordable homes that they can buy. Providing gap financing options for our people. Providing landlords with incentives to have moderate rents. Pushing for better flexibility at the state level so that we locally will have the ability to restructure and incentivize these types of housing needs on the ground. So there are many different tools that I have been instrumental in creating. One, saving the housing fund that we do have. That was going to pay an attorney and code enforcement to be punitive to our people, instead of helping to stabilize neighborhoods and provide folks with gap financing options so they can stay in their neighborhood and not be, pushed out because of these massive code liens on them. So again, using our resources wisely, but having people in positions that can meet our people with the spirit of empathy, and compassion and understanding that has to happen to create that balance, but educate our people to stay in their neighborhoods while they're being redeveloped so they're not gentrified.
Following that response, would you pledge to a certain amount of, or at least an STR saturation cap or limit?
Well, if that is what is being requested by the neighborhood, because again, it's not a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah.
Not everyone is against it. People in Broadmoor, where we are, hey, they said we don't have a problem with short-term rental. It's actually helped to strengthen the neighborhood and create some level of balance. Look at my neighbor Jay, who bought a blighted property. He lives in it. Part of his unit is a short-term rental. He purchased a slum property next door to him. He's doing that short-term rental, but he lives in the neighborhood as well. And so I don't have a problem with that. But some others do. And it means that this has to be bottom up. It has to be driven by the people who live there and being very holistic in creating that win-win. But I would make a pledge, but it will be aligned with what we're hearing from those particular neighborhoods, as well as working with the New Orleans City Council, who has the authority to strengthen any laws or restructure short-term rental.
So clarity, if the neighborhood association, is of one perspective, and that's the perspective that would hold influence in your administration?
Sure, if the neighborhood organization has truly been inclusive of the residents that live in their neighborhood, because I've seen it on all these sides, and then groups form just to fight a particular issue, but yet really don't represent the values of the neighborhood that they say. So again, just being very focused on the people who say they want a certain thing, that it is coming from a balance from that neighborhood.
Agreed. Another question regarding housing, and it speaks a little bit to one of your responses. Currently, we hold a large portfolio of unused or underutilized lots, which are largely inaccessible to city residents currently. How will you use the city's significant stock of land and to increase affordability in our housing?
Well, one, I will be working with our housing partners, even with the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority that is the holder of many of these properties. I will be working with them to push them back into commerce. I will not be punitive, looking through the lens of how can we get dollars from individuals who are reinvesting in our neighborhoods to put properties back on the market. Our practices from the city side have been very punitive, requiring, the developer that's coming in trying to invest in the neighborhood and even wanting to live there, saying that you need to go ahead on and pay off these liens that were there, and the person had nothing to do with the liens. So we have to be flexible. We have to make it easy for people to help us and to help themselves. Looking at the money from those cold liens on the front end, in my opinion, are punitive. Once the property is back into commerce, we're going to win. Everyone wins, because we will then get taxes from that property. So I would look to that. I would also look to scale up initiatives that I've started, in my district and at the community level. So whether it is the Motor Own program that I was able to get passed, but I would promulgate rules so we can actually enforce it and implement it. And that is individuals who live adjacent to parcels that are overgrown and vacant, and they're maintaining them after a year, then that sweat equity and that resources they put in, that they can acquire that property. Again, creating balance in neighborhoods, helping neighbors build wealth in the communities that they've been invested in, and also creating, building back the neighborhood and putting it into commerce. And then giving our residents the opportunity to have, Mama live around the corner again, and, Auntie Donna back, and, bringing her back from Dallas, or, Granny, come on back from Houston. Because New Orleans has always been a city, and, our neighborhoods where our people live around one another. And so that's been broken up since Katrina, and I like to think that initiatives we can get multipliers out of.
Okay. Well, will you be willing to pledge to utilize mechanisms such as land trusts and title covenants to ensure the affordability of publicly owned properties that are currently not in the market?
Well, those are things that I've done. I have a track record on that, both being the executive director of Broadmoor at one point and also as a city council person. So I would advance the work that I've started and I've lived by.
Okay.
I'll stand by it.
Thank you. Currently, private companies are, and this is another topic now, but privatization.
Okay.
Currently, private companies are being contracted to perform duties that would otherwise be performed by city employees. Many people consider this to be backdoor to privatizing our public works. Will you pledge to immediately curtail this practice?
Well, it sounds like this practice is something that is bubbling up right now as it relates to the Sewage and Water Board. Having an RFP that I've heard is out there, haven't read through the whole piece, have not been engaged with the administration on this. Unfortunately, this is a common practice that as mayor we will do away with. My colleagues on the council will be partners and they will not be left in the dark. The council right now is even left in the dark as it relates to this RFP. So right now, I've been communicating with my colleagues to get Sewage and Water Board and its leadership that the mayor's put in place before us as soon as possible. So one, that we can be educated on what's going on. You know, what are the existing conditions, but practices that will yield towards educating and building our agencies up from within and hiring locally, being true to what we say. The employees feel, their morale is in the toilet. They feel like they're overlooked as if they don't matter. And as a result of that, they disrupted a meeting last week because this is how they learned and they felt that it was moving towards privatization. I am not in favor of privatization at all, especially in a city with such great need, but people who need to be connected to those jobs and opportunity. So I'm committed to that, and yes, right now.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I won't have to ask you the next question because it was about the sewage and water bill. Next, public works and jobs programs. The city currently spends a significant portion of its regular infrastructure maintenance budget on ad hoc and expensive emergency repairs, largely forestalling relatively cheap preventative maintenance. Understanding that infrastructure projects are among the best ratio of economic stimulus effect per government dollar spent, how would you take leadership on enacting a public works project of substantial size to stabilize and improve the surface infrastructure of our city?
Sure. Well, first of all, we're going to have to retool the Department of Public Works, both in terms of leadership and management as well as in practice. We have to stop being so reactive to our problems, which when we are only on the reactive side, then it's the quick fixes, it's emergency fixes. So it doesn't mean that we're doing all, that we can to mitigate future problems, but it's that quick fix. And this has been the practice in our city for decades, even with the Sewage and Water Board. But I see this as an opportunity to retool the department overall, to create tracking and of maintenance that has to be a priority. Building in technology. We have more data than we've ever had before in terms of where our problems are, where the streets need to be fixed, all that. So incorporating technology as well as tracking systems will be a priority. But I believe too, it comes down to making sure that we have an infrastructure maintenance fund. That we're looking at infrastructure holistically, not having it a cookie cutter looking DPW, Sewage and Water Board. We need an overall vision and a strategy for infrastructure across the board, and we have to ensure that there is real interagency communication and connectivity. So that we're leveraging money wisely, we're being efficient with the resources that we do spend. I'm under the impression with just better communication and collaboration, then we'll be saving money because Sewage and Water Board won't have to come back over, after DBW is finished or vice versa. But those things really do set us back. So it's how we use the money we currently have, but a system that gets things done.
Okay. There are municipal bonds currently coming to maturity. The city has a relatively high bond rating, and national interest rates make capital exceptionally cheap. Will you propose a major bond issue to fund a comprehensive street construction plan designed to stabilize our water table and stop our city from sinking?
I am definitely open to that. I do believe that there are ways that we can be more creative and doing even certificate of indebtedness with properties that we know that are ours and that are yielding some return. but creating a system to where some of the large amounts, like World Trade Center, can be, we do the certificate of indebtedness, we can use the dollars as a whole on the front end to create that maintenance fund for infrastructure that is again tied to a larger scope and a vision of infrastructure improvements that we need, both on sewer, water, drainage, but also as it relates to streets, sidewalks, even in terms of lighting in our city. So all of these things are interconnected, and I will not overlook a bond issue to address this holistically. It's going to take us all doing things differently, and I'm willing to put everything on the table, and for us to just, one, not only discuss it all, but really do it in a manner to where it's solutions driven. And we have to break down silos. That's also tied to, you mentioned earlier, some of these boards, these commissions that have some authority on their own but are getting dollars, public dollars. So it's going to take us being creative. Everyone needs to put some skin in the game, but it's going to have to be a collaborative process to determine what that looks like. That's what I'm committed to.
Thank you. We have 3 closing questions. They're yes/no questions.
Okay.
Number 1. Do you support the continued removal of remaining monuments to white supremacy?
I support the initiatives that will come through the city council that are bottom up as it relates to any changes for streets, any changes for monuments and the like. But I'm not about being top down. I am about bottom up. And it needs to be not one-sided. It needs to be holistic, because all of our people in our city matter. And of course, these things should reflect the true values, of our city collectively. I'm open to, and I'm committed to that.
Well, the second question is similar in that, would you support taking down NOLA's phase 2 slate, which is to rename the over 200 public spaces with slaveholder names?
Again, I know that that's Take It Down NOLA. But I would like to see, in working with the council, and of course they're the boots on the ground when it comes to districts and people, to see if that is a bottom-up approach that the residents of this city can truly get behind.
Okay. And last, will you commit to maintaining New Orleans' welcoming city policies?
The welcoming cities policies, definitely I commit to that. I led that effort. And as a result, it became a priority for this administration, in which I'm very happy and thankful for. So I have no reason to not uphold something that I initiated and I very much believe in as it relates to the people of our city.
Okay. Well, if you have any closing remarks, please share them with our membership.
Well, membership, I say thank you so much, for taking the time at least to hear from me and allow me to interact with your leadership. I want to be the mayor of the city of New Orleans. I want to serve you as the next mayor. I have a demonstrated track record of listening, building consensus, and delivering results. I've taken a holistic approach to the work that I have done, both at the grassroots level, leading the city of New Orleans through recovery from a neighborhood perspective, as well as serving on the New Orleans City Council, bringing voice to many of the issues that we talked about today, whether that is housing affordability, definitely in terms of economic development, connecting our people to jobs and opportunity. Our folks need that. And I want to continue to deliver for each and every resident and citizen of the city of New Orleans. My leadership is documented in over 153 publications, 26 books, and 3 case studies written and taught at the Kennedy School of Government. So I'm not just telling you, I've been walking the talk, and I want to walk with you to get more done in our city. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Ms. Cantrell.
Yes, sir.